Fort Liberty Medical Center had seen soldiers survive explosions, sniper fire, and war zones that should have buried them. But nobody in that trauma bay was prepared for what happened the night Colonel Hayes rolled through those doors bleeding to death. The artery in his neck was gone, torn apart by shrapnel. Men with 20 years of combat medicine froze for one fatal second. Then a quiet army nurse stepped forward. 3 seconds later, the bleeding stopped, and the general, watching from the doorway, turned white, because he recognized those hands. 5 years ago, those same hands belonged to a military surgeon the entire country blamed for the death of a senator's son. A woman who vanished after her career, reputation, and life were destroyed overnight. But some ghosts don't stay buried. Tonight, the truth is coming back into the operating room. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if you love military thrillers packed with suspense, betrayal, and impossible surgeries, make sure you stay until the end. The general did not ask the question again in the trauma bay. He did not need to. Claire Donovan saw it in his face before he ever opened his mouth. Recognition had already crossed the distance between them and wrapped itself around her throat. The room behind her slowly came back to life. Medics shouted for plasma. A corpsman called vitals. Someone rolled the colonel toward the surgery, still breathing because Claire's hands had moved faster than her fear. Blood streaked the floor in dark ropes. The metallic smell clung to her skin even after she stripped off the gloves. General Ethan Rourke stood 3 feet away, tall, broad-shouldered gray at the temples, still wearing his dress uniform from some command dinner he had clearly abandoned halfway through. His ribbons caught the fluorescent light. His eyes did not leave her hands. Claire closed her fingers into fists. "I need to check on my patient, sir." Rourke's voice was quiet. "Your patient is alive because you performed a vascular repair that most trauma surgeons would not attempt without a full team and an operating microscope." Claire forced herself to breathe through her nose. "I applied pressure and closed the bleed. Do not insult me." The words landed softly, which made them worse. Around them, the trauma bay staff pretended not to listen. Nobody wanted to be pulled into a conversation involving a general, a nurse, and a miracle that should not have happened. Still, Claire could feel every glance. She had spent 5 years learning how to disappear inside crowded rooms. That night, under the surgical lights, invisibility cracked like thin glass. Rourke stepped aside and pointed toward the hallway. "My office, now." It was not a request. Claire looked toward the exit doors at the end of the trauma bay. Beyond them waited the parking lot, her old Jeep, a duffel bag hidden under the back seat, $3,000 in cash taped beneath the spare tire, and the familiar road out of town. Raleigh first, then maybe Richmond, maybe Norfolk. Any place where no one knew her face. Running had become muscle memory, but running now would confirm everything he had seen. So Claire followed him. The corridors of Fort Liberty Medical Center were too clean for the hour. Floors polished to a shine. Flags hanging motionless along the walls. Posters reminding soldiers that resilience was a duty. Through the glass of the intensive care wing, she saw wounded men sleeping under pale blue monitors. Some had legs. Some did not. Some had families folded into chairs beside them fighting sleep, because closing their eyes felt like surrender. Claire kept her eyes forward. Rourke walked ahead of her without looking back. He did not need to check if she was following. His office sat at the far end of the surgical command wing, past a secure door that opened with his badge and a soft electronic chirp. Inside, the room smelled like leather, old coffee, and antiseptic. One wall held framed photographs from combat hospitals in Iraq, Afghanistan, Germany, and places no caption named. In one photo, a younger Rourke stood outside a canvas surgical tent with blood on his sleeves and smoke in the background. Claire saw herself reflected faintly in the glass. Dark hair pulled tight. Nurse's uniform stained at the cuffs. Face calm enough to fool strangers. Not calm enough to fool him. Rourke shut the door. The click sounded final. "Sit down," he said. "I have patients. They have teams. I am on shift, and I am the commanding surgical officer in this facility. Sit. Claire sat in the chair opposite his desk. She kept her back straight, hands folded, expression neutral. She had survived congressional hearings, death threats, military investigators, and reporters camped outside a hotel room calling her a butcher through the door. One general with suspicious eyes should not have shaken her. But he had seen her hands. That was different. Rourke moved behind his desk and woke the tablet sitting beside a stack of casualty reports. He typed her name with one finger. Sergeant Nurse Claire Donovan, he read. Army Nurse Corps. Excellent performance reviews. No disciplinary actions. No family listed. No emergency contact other than a post office box in Wilmington. 3 years at Landstuhl before transferring here. Before that, Fort Sam Houston. Before that, civilian nursing program in Oregon. Claire said nothing. Rourke looked up. Clean file. That sounds like a compliment. It would be if it were real. Her pulse beat once in her throat. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was her official photograph. Claire Donovan. Calm eyes. Short brown hair. A woman built out of paperwork and survival. Rourke swiped. Another image appeared. This one was older. A medical symposium photo taken under warm hotel lights. A woman stood at a podium wearing a navy dress uniform, one hand lifted as she explained a surgical diagram behind her. Her hair was longer then. Her face sharper. Her eyes brighter in a way Claire hated seeing. The caption beneath the photo read, Dr. Rachel Monroe, Navy, Trauma Surgery, Combat Vascular Reconstruction Panel. Claire stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Rourke watched her. You should have changed the hands, he said. Claire's voice came out flat. I do not know that woman. Yes, you do. No, sir. I served with her. The office seemed to tilt. Rourke tapped the screen again. The image changed to a grainy photograph outside a forward surgical unit in Kandahar. Dust hung in the air. A Black Hawk sat in the background with its rotors frozen by the camera. Several surgeons stood shoulder to shoulder, exhausted and half smiling. Rachel Monroe stood at the edge of the group. Ethan Rourke stood beside her younger leaner, his hand resting on her shoulder. Claire felt the old world rise beneath her feet like floodwater. Rourke's voice softened not with pity, but with certainty. Kandahar. July. We took 12 casualties in 40 minutes after an ambush near Highway 1. You repaired 3 femoral arteries, 1 subclavian, and a torn carotid before sunrise. You used that same stitch tonight. Same wrist angle, same needle rotation, same impossible speed. Claire looked away. People learn techniques. People do not learn yours by accident. Silence filled the room. Outside the window, runway lights blinked red across the base. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter lifted into the night, its blades thudding like a second heartbeat. Rourke sat slowly. 5 years ago, Captain Dylan Whitaker died on your table at Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. Claire closed her eyes for half a second, not long enough to give him the satisfaction of seeing pain. Rourke continued. Dylan Whitaker, 27, Marine Captain. Son of Senator Grant Whitaker of Virginia. Official cause of death was surgical mismanagement during emergency repair of a thoracic aortic rupture. Claire's fingernails pressed into her palms. Official cause of death was a lie. I know. Her eyes snapped back to him. Rourke held her gaze. I read the sealed report before it disappeared. For the first time since entering the office, Claire could not control her face. Rourke leaned forward. The tissue failure was catastrophic. The vessel walls disintegrated under normal tension. No surgeon could have held that repair. Not you, not me, not anyone. Claire said nothing. If she spoke, something inside her would break open. Rourke's voice lowered. But Senator Whitaker needed a villain. The military needed the story contained. The press needed a monster with a name. So they gave them yours, Rachel Monroe. The name had once opened doors, operating rooms, conferences, research grants, command appointments. Young doctors used to chase her after lectures with notebooks in their hands. Senior surgeons had called her gifted, fearless, dangerous in the way genius often was. Then one man died. One powerful father screamed. And the same name became a target. Claire remembered the hallway outside the hearing room. Cameras pressed so close she could smell rain on reporters' coats. A woman shouting murderer until her voice cracked. Security guards pushing through the crowd. Someone spitting on her sleeve. A letter slid under her apartment door with a photograph of her face crossed out in red marker. 2 weeks later, Rachel Monroe vanished. Claire Donovan learned to keep her head down, chart medications, change dressings, and never touch a scalpel again. Rourke set the tablet down. "Why did you run?" Claire laughed once without humor. "You mean after my command abandoned me, the senator destroyed me, and half the country decided I killed his son for sport? I mean before the board finished its review. The board had already decided. You do not know that. I know men in uniforms very well, General, especially when they are afraid of politicians." Rourke absorbed the hit without flinching. Fair enough. He stood and walked to the window. Below, an ambulance rolled through the gate lights, spinning silently from this height. "I looked up Claire Donovan 2 months ago," he said. Claire went cold. "Why?" "Because you corrected a resident during a chest tube placement without looking up from a supply cart. You used language I had only heard in combat surgery. Then last week you repositioned a clamp on a vascular tray before Dr. Milton even knew he had said it wrong." Claire swallowed. "I was being helpful. You were hiding badly. I was surviving." That stopped him. For a moment, the general in him faded, and something older appeared. A battlefield surgeon who understood that survival could look like cowardice to people who had never had to bleed for it. Then he turned back. Tonight changed things. "No," Claire said. "Tonight was an emergency. The colonel would have died." "Exactly." She stood. "This conversation is over." "No." "With respect, sir, unless you plan to arrest me for being good at my job, I am leaving." Rourke's jaw tightened. "I need your help." Claire paused at the door. The words were not what she expected. Slowly, she turned. Rourke removed his right hand from his pocket and held it out under the desk lamp. At first, nothing happened. Then the tremor began. Small, rhythmic, unmistakable. Claire knew the pattern before he said it. Every clinician did. But in a surgeon's hand, it looked like a death sentence. "Early onset Parkinson's," Rourke said. "Stage 2. Diagnosed 8 months ago." Claire stared at his hand. He closed it into a fist. "Nobody knows." "My neurologist. One civilian specialist, now you. You are still operating. I am still capable." "That was not my question." Rourke's eyes hardened. "I have spent 30 years cutting men open in tents, hangars, carriers, and hospitals while shells landed close enough to shake instruments off trays. I have saved soldiers other surgeons wrote off as already dead. I know exactly what my hands can and cannot do." Claire's voice was quiet. "And how long until you cannot hide it?" Rourke looked back out the window. 6 months, maybe less. The anger Claire had carried into the room shifted into something more complicated. She had hated his suspicion, hated the way he looked at her like a puzzle he had solved. But his hand had betrayed him the way hers had betrayed her tonight. Bodies were cruel that way. They told truths people spent years burying. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Rourke picked up another folder from his desk and laid it open. Inside were scans. Dark, detailed images of a chest cavity lit in ghostly gray. Claire did not move closer, but her eyes sharpened before she could stop them. Rourke saw it. "Master Sergeant Luke Hayes," he said. "Delta. 41 years old. 2 daughters. Wife on base. Injured during a classified training incident off Cape Lookout. Shrapnel entered below the left clavicle and traveled deep. He has a contained thoracic aortic injury. The containment is failing." Claire stepped toward the desk despite herself. "When were these taken?" 90 minutes ago. Where is he now?" "I see you." Sedated. Pressors barely holding him. She studied the images. Her mind began moving against her will. Entry path. Vessel damage. Probable branch involvement. Possible graft line. bleeding risk, cooling strategy, exposure problem, time problem. Rourke said nothing. He let the scans speak. Claire looked up. Transfer him to Walter Reed. He will not survive the flight. Bring in vascular from Duke. 2 hours out in this storm, maybe 3. He needs a hybrid team. He needs you. Claire stepped back as if the scans had burned her. No, Rachel. Do not call me that. Dr. Monroe. Claire slammed her hand on the desk. She is gone. The sound cracked through the office. For a long second, both of them stood still. Then, Rourke said, a man is dying 1 floor below us. Men die in hospitals every day. Not when the one person who can save them is standing upstairs pretending she forgot how. Claire looked at him with the coldness she had spent years perfecting. You do not get to drag me back into that room because your hands are failing. Rourke's face changed. The blow landed, but he did not deny it. No, he said, I do not, but I'm asking anyway. Claire's breathing grew shallow. You want a ghost to operate under a false name in a military hospital while the entire command structure sleeps above us. I want a surgeon to save a soldier. And when someone finds out, I protect you. She almost smiled. Like the Navy protected me. Rourke had no answer. That silence was honest enough to hurt. Claire picked up the folder and forced herself to look at the scans again. Luke Hayes' aorta glowed on the film like a fault line before an earthquake. The injury was bad. Worse than bad. It was the kind of case that sat in a surgeon's mind long after the lights went out. She could see the repair. Not easily, not safely, but she could see it. That was the worst part. Rourke watched her with a patience that felt like pressure. Claire closed the folder. No. His expression did not move. Number. No. I can review the scans. I can advise. I can tell you what approach I would consider if I were still that person. But I will not scrub in. I will not stand over another open chest while lawyers, cameras, and politicians wait outside to decide what my hands meant after the fact. There are no cameras. There are always cameras. You just do not see them until they have your face. Rourke looked away. Claire moved toward the door again. This time he did not stop her, but his voice followed. His daughters are 6 and 9. Her hand froze on the knob. Low, unfair, effective. Rourke continued. They came in with his wife. The older one asked if her father was going to miss her piano recital. The younger one gave the ICU nurse a stuffed rabbit to put beside his bed. Claire did not turn around. That is cruel. Yes, you are using his children against me. I am using the truth. Claire opened the door. Rourke's final words followed her into the hall. You can hate me in the morning. Just look at the scans tonight. The corridor outside felt colder than before. Claire walked without knowing where she meant to go. Past the surgical wing. Past the ICU doors. Past a chapel no bigger than a storage room where a woman in sweatpants sat alone with her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles had gone white. Claire knew without asking. Luke Hayes' wife. The woman looked up as Claire passed. For 1 second their eyes met. There was no accusation in the woman's face. No demand. Just raw exhaustion and a kind of hope so fragile it seemed cruel to breathe near it. Claire kept walking. At the end of the hall, she pushed through a service door into the stairwell and leaned against the concrete wall. Her hands shook now. She hated Rourke for seeing her. She hated the colonel for bleeding in front of her. She hated Luke Hayes for having children. She hated herself most of all because the moment she saw the scans, a part of her had come alive. Not the frightened part. Not Claire Donovan. Rachel. The name moved through her like a wound reopening. She pulled out her phone with stiff fingers. There were no personal messages. There rarely were. Claire Donovan had built a life with no loose ends. No family photographs. No old friends. No one who could be threatened. No one who could betray her. A secure message arrived from an unknown hospital extension. Rourke. Attached were Luke Hayes' full scans lab's operative notes and a short line of text. He has hours, not days. Claire stared at the message. Then another came through. I am not asking you to be who you were. I am asking you to remember what you know." Claire locked the phone. For 5 years she had survived by refusing exactly that. Remembering was dangerous. Remembering brought back the desert operating room where Dylan Whitaker's blood would not stop pouring into suction canisters. It brought back the snap of vessel tissue tearing under perfect technique. It brought back the flatline, the senator's face, the hearing chamber, the headlines, the way strangers could take a life they had never lived and burn it down for something to watch. She pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum until the pressure steadied her breathing. A code alarm sounded somewhere below. The hospital came alive around her again. Footsteps, voices, wheels, orders. War did not pause for grief. Claire descended the stairs to the ICU. She told herself she was only checking, only reviewing, only doing what any good nurse would do. Luke Hayes lay behind glass under a web of tubes and monitors. His face was bruised. His chest rose mechanically. Beside his bed sat a stuffed rabbit with one bent ear. On the other side of the glass, his wife slept in a chair with both daughters curled against her, their small bodies folded into exhaustion. Claire stood there for a long time. Then she opened the scan file on her phone. Her eyes moved over the injury again. The repair path appeared piece by piece. Difficult, bloody, almost impossible, but not impossible. Behind her, General Rourke's voice came softly. "I did not think you would come down here." Claire did not look at him. "I told you I would review." And she watched the monitor trace Luke Hayes' heartbeat across the screen. He needs circulatory control before opening the chest. Left thoracotomy will not give enough exposure. Median sternotomy with extension. Prep for bypass. Have 2 graft sizes ready. 3 would be safer. Blood products in the room before incision. Not nearby. In the room. Rourke listened without interrupting. Claire continued, her voice becoming steadier with every word. "If the posterior wall is involved, you will not see it until you are already committed. If that happens, do not chase the bleed blindly. You will tear the branch vessels. You need to cool him first and buy time." Rourke's eyes did not leave her. "You keep saying you." Claire finally turned. The hallway lights carved shadows under her eyes. "Because I am not scrubbing in." Rourke nodded once, but his expression said he did not believe her. Claire hated him for that too. She handed back the folder. "Call Duke again. Call Walter Reed. Call anyone with hands steadier than yours and a name cleaner than mine." Rourke took the folder. "And if no one gets here in time." Claire looked through the glass at Luke Hayes' daughters. The younger one stirred in her sleep and clutched the rabbit's empty place against her chest. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. Then, God help him. She walked away before Rourke could answer. But she did not leave the hospital. At 4:12 a.m., Claire sat alone in an empty staff room with the lights off, Luke Hayes' scans glowing on the screen in front of her. The rain beat harder against the window. Somewhere below, a soldier's damaged artery kept thinning with every heartbeat. Claire leaned closer to the screen, picked up a pen, and began drawing the first incision. Claire did not remember deciding to stay. One moment she was standing outside Luke Hayes' ICU room, telling General Rourke she would not scrub in. The next, she was hunched over a dim staff room table with a pen in her hand, marking incision lines across printed scans like a soldier planning an assault route. The hospital had gone quiet in that strange hour before dawn, when even war seemed to hold its breath. Rain tapped against the windows. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a ventilator breathed for a man whose body had not yet decided whether it wanted to keep fighting. Claire drew one line, stopped, then drew another. "No," she whispered. She flipped the scan sideways. The injury was not behaving like a clean aortic tear. The shrapnel had entered high-angled deep, then tumbled. It had not sliced the vessel as much as bruised it from the inside out. That meant the outer wall was probably holding by almost nothing. If Rourke opened the wrong plane, Luke Hayes would bleed out before the first clamp landed. Claire rubbed her eyes. She had not slept. Her body felt hollow, But the old part of her mind, the part she had tried to bury under 5 years of wound charts and medication rounds, was wide awake. It built the operation in layers: entry, exposure, control, bypass, repair, escape. That was how battlefield surgery worked. You did not win. You bought time from death until the patient could survive the next hour. The staff room door opened behind her. Claire did not turn. "I said I would review," she said. General Rourke stepped inside with 2 paper cups of coffee. "You have been reviewing for 3 hours." She reached for the cup without looking at him. "His posterior wall is involved." Rourke went still. "You are sure?" "No, that is the problem." He moved closer and looked down at the scan. Claire pointed with the pen. "See the shadow here? It is not artifact. It is contained leakage. If you approach from the left side only, you will miss it until the pressure comes back. Then he dies during closure or in the ICU." Rourke studied the image. His jaw tightened. "You changed the plan." There was no plan. There was a prayer with instruments. He almost smiled. Almost. Then his right hand trembled around the coffee cup. A thin ripple crossed the black surface. Claire saw it. So did he. Rourke set the cup down. "It is worse when I am tired." "You are always tired." "That is true. You cannot lead this case." He looked at her. "Then say it plainly." Claire met his eyes. "If you take primary on this operation, you may kill him." The words sat between them, brutal and necessary. Rourke inhaled slowly through his nose. Pride moved across his face first, then anger, then something closer to grief. He had built his life around his hands, around the certainty that when everything else failed, he could still cut, clamp, repair, and save. Now, the thing that made him who he was had begun to betray him in private, and Claire had just dragged the betrayal under bright lights. He nodded once. "Then you lead." "Number." "Yes. I have no authority. I have enough for both of us. I do not have a license under that name. You have a military credential buried under the name Rachel Monroe. That credential is suspended, pending review, not revoked." Claire stood so fast the chair scraped back. "You checked." "I checked everything." Her voice turned cold. "You had no right. I had a dying soldier. You had curiosity. I had both." For a second, she wanted to throw the coffee in his face. Not because he was wrong, but because he had found pieces of her life she had nailed shut. Rourke's voice softened. "Claire, do not." "Rachel." She flinched. He saw it and regretted it immediately. "I am sorry." "No, you are not. You are right. I am not sorry I found you. I am sorry I have to ask this from you." Claire turned away. Beyond the rain-streaked window, the first pale light of morning began to bleed across the base. She could see the runway from here. Helicopters parked in rows like sleeping insects. Somewhere out there, soldiers were waking up, tying boots, checking weapons, kissing children goodbye, pretending danger belonged to other people. Luke Hayes had probably done the same yesterday. Claire closed her eyes. "Who knows? About you." "Yes, only me." "That better be true." "It is. If I do this, no one says Rachel Monroe. No one speaks that name in the OR. No one puts it in a chart. No one whispers it in a hallway." Rourke nodded. "And if your hand shakes once during a critical step, I take over completely." "Agreed." "No ego." "No ego. The patient comes first." Rourke's eyes held hers, always. Claire looked back at the scan. A 5-year grave opened inside her. She stepped into it anyway. "Operating room 3, she said. "Have him there in 40 minutes. Rourke straightened. "Yes, doctor." Claire's jaw tightened. "Do not call me that." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Sergeant Donovan." By 5:10, the surgical suite had begun to wake. Nurses moved with quiet urgency, opening sterile trays, counting sponges, checking suction lines. The perfusion team rolled in the bypass machine. Blood products arrived in red coolers under military escort. Outside the OR, 2 residents argued in low voices until Rourke cut them off with a look. Claire stood at the scrub sink sleeves, rolled hands under hot water. She had washed for surgery thousands of times in another life. The body remembered before the heart could object. Palms, nails, wrists, forearms. The brush moved in small circles. Her breathing changed. The world narrowed. Water ran pink for a moment from a cut on her knuckle she had not noticed. She stared at it. Dylan Whitaker's blood had been darker. She shut the memory down. Rourke stepped to the sink beside her. "You can still walk away," he said. Claire kept scrubbing. "No, I cannot." He did not answer. That was the first honest thing between them all night. Inside the operating room, Master Sergeant Luke Hayes lay under bright lights already anesthetized. His chest was prepped and draped. Tubes ran from his arms, neck, and mouth. The monitors showed a pressure barely strong enough to count as life. At the edge of the room stood Luke's wife, allowed one final moment before they began. She wore an oversized sweatshirt and had her arms wrapped around herself as if holding her body together by force. Claire recognized her from the ICU. Rourke approached first. "Mrs. Hayes." The woman looked from him to Claire. "Are you the surgeon?" The question hit the room like a dropped instrument. Claire felt every staff member pause. Rourke answered before she could. "Sergeant Donovan is assisting me with advanced trauma management." Mrs. Hayes looked at Claire anyway. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot. She looked too young to be standing beside a husband who might never wake up. "Can you save him?" No one in the room breathed. Claire wanted to give the answer families wanted. "Yes, we will bring him back. He is strong. We have hope." She had learned long ago that false comfort was just another kind of harm. "We are going to fight for him," Claire said. "Every second." Mrs. Hayes swallowed. "He promised our youngest he would come home before Saturday." Claire looked at Luke's still face. "Then we have work to do." Mrs. Hayes nodded once, pressed her lips to her husband's forehead, and whispered something too soft to hear. When she left, the doors closed behind her with a seal that sounded like a vault. The anesthesiologist looked up. "Pressure is 80/40 and drifting." Claire stepped to the table. Rourke stood across from her. He let her take the primary position without a word. A scrub nurse glanced at him confused. Rourke's voice was calm. "Sergeant Donovan will call instruments." The nurse hesitated for half a second. Claire held out her hand. "Scalpel." The hesitation ended. Cold metal touched her palm. The room sharpened. Claire looked down at Luke Hayes's chest. For 5 years she had told herself the knife was behind her. That the person who knew how to open a human body and find life inside the wreckage had died in a storm of cameras and accusations. But the scalpel fit perfectly. Of course it did. She made the first incision. Skin parted cleanly. No thunder. No memory. No ghost rising from the floor. Just tissue. Just blood. Just work. Deepen. The electrocautery hissed. Smoke curled sharp and familiar. Retractors opened the sternum. The saw vibrated through bone. A resident shifted nervously near the foot of the table. Claire heard it without looking. "Do not lock your knees, Lieutenant. If you faint into my field, I will be irritated." A nervous laugh passed through the room, then died quickly as the chest opened. There it was. The damage. Rourke leaned in. "Damn." Claire's eyes moved across the field. The aorta bulged beneath bruised tissue, swollen and angry, its wall stretched thin by pressure and trauma. The shrapnel had not remained inside. It had done its violence and moved on, leaving behind a vessel waiting to fail. "Bypass ready?" Claire asked. The perfusionist answered ready. "Blood. 6 units in room, more on standby." "Good, heparin." The anesthesiologist administered it. Claire placed the first clamp with the care of someone setting down a live explosive. Nothing tore. Not yet. Rourke held exposure. His left hand was steady. His right hand rested against the retractor frame for support. Claire noticed. She said nothing. The room entered that sacred rhythm of surgery where words became short because everything else mattered more. Clamp. Suction. Graft. Needle. Pressure. Again. The first repair line went in clean. Claire moved fast, but not theatrically. Speed in an operating room was not rushing. It was the absence of wasted motion. Her hands crossed the field with certainty, needle turning through tissue at angles so precise the resident stopped pretending not to watch. Rourke watched too. Not her face, her hands. "You are crowding the vessel," Claire said. Rourke adjusted instantly. "Better. 2 millimeters left." He moved. There. 30 minutes passed. Then 40. Luke's pressure stabilized slightly as bypass took over more work. Claire trimmed the damaged section and prepared the graft. The vessel wall was worse than she hoped, but not as bad as she feared. For a few dangerous minutes, the operation almost behaved. Then the posterior wall gave way. Blood filled the field so fast it erased everything. "Suction," Claire said. 2 suction tips moved in. More. The monitor alarm screamed. The anesthesiologist's voice cut across the room. Pressure dropping. 60 systolic. Rourke shifted to improve exposure. His right hand trembled. The retractor moved half an inch. Claire's eyes flashed. "Freeze." He froze. "Do not move." His face went gray. "I have it." "No, you do not." She held out her left hand. "Captain Ellis, take the retractor from General Rourke." The resident stared. Rourke said, "Do it." Ellis stepped in, hands tense but steady. Claire did not look away from the bleed. General stepped back. For 1 second, the entire room seemed to understand that something larger than the operation had just happened. Rourke stepped back. The tremor in his hand was visible now. He curled it into his palm. Claire found the tear by feel more than sight. Her fingers moved through heat and blood until they reached the hidden edge. The tissue was soft. Too soft. "Posterior rupture confirmed," she said. "Patch reinforcement now." The scrub nurse placed the patch in her hand. A resident whispered, "Can that hold?" Claire answered without looking up. "It has to." The needle entered tissue. The first bite held. The second almost tore. Claire changed angle mid-motion, rotated the wrist, caught healthier wall, and tied down with less tension than instinct wanted. Thread. Pierce. Pull. Knot. The room shrank to the space between her fingers. Dylan's surgery flickered at the edge of her mind. Blood that would not stop. A vessel that dissolved. A monitor falling into one long tone. She forced the memory down. Luke Hayes was not Dylan Whitaker. This table was not that table. This time she had seen the trap before it closed. "Pressure," she asked. 50. "Hold him." "We are trying." "No," Claire said, voice sharp as steel. "You are doing it." The anesthesiologist snapped into motion with renewed focus. Claire placed the final 3 sutures in under 20 seconds. The bleeding slowed, then thinned, then stopped. Nobody celebrated. Not yet. Claire checked the line once, twice, then ran her fingers lightly along the repair. "Holding," she said. The anesthesiologist exhaled. Pressure climbing, 65-70. The resident at the retractor looked like he might cry. Claire glanced at him. "Good hands, Captain." He swallowed. "Thank you. Do not get sentimental. We are not done." They were not. The secondary damage extended farther than the scan suggested. Claire had to revise the distal graft preserve branch flow and manage a clot forming near the injury line. Every solution created another risk. Every minute under bypass stole something from Luke's body they might need later. 2 hours became 3. 3 became 4. Rourke remained near the field but no longer touched the critical instruments. He called labs, watched the monitors, anticipated what Claire needed before she asked. It was not the role he wanted. It was the role the patient needed. That mattered. Near the 5th hour, Claire's shoulders began to burn. Sweat gathered under her cap. A nurse dabbed her forehead. She barely noticed. "Last suture line," she said. The room tightened around the words. She placed the final stitches slowly, each one seated in fragile tissue with the kind of tenderness no one outside surgery would ever associate with violence. When she tied the last knot, she kept her hand there a moment longer, waiting. The graft held. Flow restored. No leak. The monitor showed a pressure that looked almost human. The anesthesiologist smiled behind his mask. "He is stable." No one moved. Claire stepped back. "Warm him." Wean bypass slowly. Watch the pressure. If it spikes, he bleeds. If it drops, we lose the graft. Rourke nodded to the team. You heard her. They worked through closure with careful fatigue. The danger did not vanish just because the bleeding had stopped. Trauma patients were treacherous. They survived the obvious injury and died later from the quiet ones. But Luke Hayes made it off bypass. His heart took over, weak at first, then stronger. By the time they closed his chest, dawn had fully broken over Fort Liberty. Gray light pressed against the high OR windows. The rain had stopped. Claire stripped off her gloves. Her hands ached. Not shook. Ached. That distinction mattered. Rourke came beside her as the team prepared Luke for transfer to ICU. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "You saved him." Claire watched the nurses secure the tubes. "He is alive. That is not the same thing." "It is today." She looked at him then. His right hand was still trembling faintly at his side. He did not hide it this time. "I am sorry," she said. The words surprised both of them. Rourke gave a small tired nod. "So am I." Luke Hayes was wheeled out under a portable monitor surrounded by staff. Claire followed as far as the ICU doors, then stopped before the family waiting area. Mrs. Hayes stood when she saw them. Her daughters were beside her, the younger one, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest. Rourke began to speak, but Claire stepped forward. "He survived the operation," she said. Mrs. Hayes covered her mouth. Claire continued before hope could become too wild. "He is still critical. The next 48 hours matter. But his heart is beating. The repair is holding." The older daughter stared up at Claire. "Can he hear us?" Claire crouched so they were eye level. "Maybe. Soldiers hear more than they admit." The girl nodded seriously as if this confirmed something she already suspected. The younger child held out the rabbit. "Can he have it back now?" Claire took it carefully. "I will make sure it stays with him." Mrs. Hayes began to cry without sound. Rourke looked away to give her privacy. Claire carried the rabbit into the ICU and placed it beside Luke's hand. His fingers did not move, but the monitor kept tracing his heartbeat in green light. That was enough for now. When Claire finally stepped into the locker room, the adrenaline left her all at once. She gripped the sink. Her reflection stared back from the mirror. Pale face. Blood at the edge of her collar. Surgical cap still on. Eyes too old for Claire Donovan. For a second, she saw Rachel Monroe standing there. Not dead. Not forgiven. Just waiting. Claire pulled off the cap and turned on the faucet. Cold water ran over her wrists. She bowed her head and let herself breathe. The locker room door opened. She straightened immediately. Rourke stood there, careful not to enter too far. "Sorry, this is the women's locker room." "I know. I am standing on the correct side of the threshold." Despite herself, Claire almost smiled. "Almost." "What?" "There is someone asking for you." Her body went still. "Who?" Rourke's expression changed, and the small, almost smile vanished from her face before he spoke. "A civilian woman. Expensive coat. Security tried to stop her, but she had clearance from the Pentagon Liaison Office." Claire dried her hands slowly. "What is her name?" Rourke hesitated. "She said you would know her." The old fear rose before the name did. Then Rourke said it. Madison Whitaker. The room narrowed. For a moment, Claire heard cameras again, reporters shouting. A senator's voice breaking on national television as he called her reckless, dangerous, guilty. She gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles whitened. Rourke watched her carefully. "You do not have to see her." Claire looked at her reflection. Claire Donovan looked terrified. Rachel Monroe looked furious. She turned off the water. "Yes," she said. "I do." Madison Whitaker was waiting outside the surgical command wing like she owned the hallway. She wore a black wool coat tailored so cleanly it looked out of place beneath the hard fluorescent lights of Fort Liberty Medical Center. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was flawless. One hand held a phone. The other gripped the strap of a leather bag tight enough to whiten her knuckles. Claire stopped 20 feet away. For 5 years, she had imagined seeing a Whitaker again. In those imagined moments, there had always been anger first. Hot, clean, righteous. But standing there now with dried blood still beneath one fingernail and Luke Hayes's heartbeat still echoing in her ears, Claire felt something colder. Recognition. Madison looked older than she had in the news footage. Less polished around the eyes. Grief had a way of surviving money power and good lighting. General Rourke moved slightly ahead of Claire. This is a restricted medical area. Madison did not look at him. I know. Then you know you need authorization to be here. I have authorization. Not from me. Madison's eyes stayed on Claire. I'm not here to cause trouble, General. Claire almost laughed. Whitakers never came without trouble. Madison took one step forward. Dr. Monroe. The name struck the hallway like a gunshot. A nurse at the far station looked up. Claire's face did not change. Rourke's did. You need to lower your voice, he said. Madison's mouth tightened. I need 5 minutes. Claire said nothing. Madison looked at the blood on Claire's sleeve, then at her hands. You were in surgery. That happens in hospitals. I heard the operator survived. Claire's eyes sharpened. How did you hear that? Madison did not answer fast enough. Rourke noticed too. Who are you getting information from inside this facility? Madison finally looked at him. People who still answer my father's calls. The hallway went quiet. Claire stepped around Rourke. There it is. Madison looked back at her. I didn't come here to threaten you. No, your family usually hires cameras for that. The words hit. Madison absorbed them without flinching, but something painful moved behind her eyes. You have every right to hate us. Claire moved closer. You came all the way onto a military base to tell me something I already know. Madison swallowed. My father is dying. For a second, the hallway seemed to lose all sound. Claire stared at her. Then she gave a short, humorless breath. Good. Rourke turned slightly toward her, but he did not speak. Madison's face tightened, not in anger, in hurt. That almost made it worse. He has an aortic dissection, Madison said. It started small. They tried to manage it medically. It's spreading. Claire's jaw set. I'm sure Senator Whitaker can afford excellent doctors. He has seen 12. Then he has 12 opinions. All of them said no. Smart doctors. Madison's voice lowered. They said the anatomy is too damaged, too risky, too much political exposure. Claire smiled without warmth. Your family does have a talent for making surgeons regret entering medicine. Madison took that one too. Rourke stepped in. Miss Whitaker, whatever this is, Sergeant Donovan just came out of a long operation. She is not available. She is the only one who can save him. Claire's eyes turned hard. No, you haven't seen the scans. I don't need to. Yes, you do. No, Claire said, I really don't. Madison reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed medical folder. She held it out. Claire did not take it. Madison's hand remained extended between them. My father has maybe 2 weeks. Then you should spend them with him. He asked for you. That made Claire's blood go cold. Of course he did. He wants to speak with you. He wanted to destroy me, too. He got that. Madison's voice cracked for the first time. I know. Claire blinked. It was small. Almost nothing. But Madison saw it. I know what he did, Madison said. Claire's stare sharpened. You know nothing. I know Dylan had Marfan syndrome. The hallway disappeared. Claire heard only the soft hum of the lights. Madison continued quieter now. I know the autopsy showed connective tissue failure. I know the rupture began before the operation became unrecoverable. I know you did not kill my brother. Claire did not move. For 5 years, she had dreamed of someone from that family saying those words. Now that they had come, they did not heal anything. They cut deeper. Rourke looked between them silent. Claire's voice dropped. How long have you known? Madison looked down. 3 months. Claire took one step closer. 3 months. I needed proof. You needed courage. Madison looked up, and this time there was no polished mask. Yes, the honesty landed harder than any excuse. Claire turned away because if she kept looking at Madison's face, she might see grief where she wanted only guilt. Madison said I hired a private investigator after my father collapsed at a fundraiser in Raleigh. The doctors found the same genetic markers Dylan had. That's when I started asking questions. Claire's voice was flat. Congratulations. I found sealed records. Not all of them. Enough. Enough to clear my name. Yes. Claire turned back slowly. And yet here you are in a hallway asking me for a favor instead of calling a press conference. Madison flinched. My father wants to make a statement. Claire laughed. The sound was sharp enough that the nurse at the station looked up again. Your father wants to make a statement now because Death walked into his room and shook his hand. Madison did not deny it. Claire looked at the folder. No. Please. No. Dr. Monroe. Do not call me that. Claire. You do not get to call me that either. Madison's hand lowered. For a moment she looked less like a senator's daughter and more like a woman standing in front of the person her family had buried alive. My brother was 27, Madison said. Claire's face hardened. I know exactly how old he was. He wanted to be a doctor after the Marines. Did you know that? Claire did not answer. He used to read trauma journals on leave. He said battlefield medicine was the closest thing to holy work he had ever seen. Stop. Madison's eyes filled. He would have hated what my father did to you. Claire stepped close enough that Madison had to tilt her head. Your brother died on my table while I fought for 92 minutes to save him. Then your father stood in front of the country and called me reckless. He let people send me death threats. He let the Navy turn its back. He let strangers spit on me outside a hearing room. Madison's tears slipped free, but she stayed still. Claire's voice shook now, and she hated that too. I cut my hair in a motel bathroom with kitchen scissors. I burned my uniforms in a dumpster behind a gas station. I changed my name, my voice, my walk, the way I signed birthday cards to no one. So don't stand here and tell me what Dylan would have hated. Madison whispered, I'm sorry. Claire's mouth twisted. No, you're desperate. Yes. The answer stopped her. Madison wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. I am desperate. I am ashamed. I am late. I am all of it. But my father is still dying. Claire stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned to Rourke. Get her out. Rourke looked at Madison. You heard her. Madison placed the folder on the nearest counter. I'll leave the scans. Claire did not look at them. Madison took a breath. There is something else. Claire closed her eyes. Of course there is. My father's political strategist, Victor Sloan. He doesn't want the surgery to happen unless it fails. Rourke's face changed. What does that mean? Madison looked toward the security camera at the end of the hall, then lowered her voice. It means my father was preparing to retire and publicly correct the record about Dylan. Sloan built half his influence on my father's crusade after the scandal. Defense contracts, campaign money, Senate hearings. If the truth comes out, he loses everything. Claire said nothing. Madison continued. If my father dies during surgery, Sloan gets a martyr. If you are the surgeon, he gets a scapegoat too. Claire's heart went very still. Rourke asked, Do you have proof? Not enough. Then you have suspicion. I have recordings of him pressuring my father not to make the statement. I have donor calls, internal memos, nothing direct. Claire's voice was cold. And yet you came to me. Because if there is any chance of saving my father without letting Sloan bury the truth again, it is you. No, Claire said. Madison looked at her. No. Claire pointed toward the exit. Take your folder. Take your guilt. Take your father's money and your family name and leave. Madison stood still for one more second. Then she picked up the folder. But before she turned away, she said softly, He has asked for you every time the pain medication wears off. Claire did not respond. Madison walked down the hall, her heels clicking against the polished floor, until the sound faded behind the secure doors. Only then did Claire realize she was shaking. Rourke noticed. She knew too much, he said. Claire looked at him. She is a Whitaker. They always know too much. You believe her? Claire wanted to say no. That would have been easier. Instead, she looked at the empty space where Madison had stood. I believe she's afraid. Rourke nodded toward the counter. She left one page. Claire turned. A single scan had been removed from the folder and placed beside a stack of surgical gloves. Claire stared at it. Even from a distance, the damage was obvious. Her body moved before her pride could stop it. She picked it up. Senator Grant Whitaker's aorta curved across the film like a cracked bridge under too much weight. The dissection ran long and ugly, beginning near the arch and traveling down toward the descending thoracic segment. There were irregular shadows along the vessel wall, old damage, new bleeding, genetic weakness hiding beneath political power. Claire hated that she understood it immediately. Rourke stood beside her. Bad. Claire's eyes traced the image. Worse. Operable. She did not answer. That was answer enough. Rourke's voice lowered. You do not have to touch this. Claire set the scan down. You think I don't know that? I think you just saved one impossible patient, and now the family that destroyed you is asking you to save another. Claire's laugh came out thin. Efficient day. Rourke studied her. What are you going to do? Claire walked away. Sleep. But she did not sleep. She drove home after shift with blood still under her nails and Madison's scan folded inside her jacket pocket. She did not remember putting it there. Her apartment sat above a closed laundromat on the edge of Fayetteville. One bedroom. Thin walls. Cheap blinds. No photographs. No plants. Nothing breakable. Nothing that could not be left behind in under 10 minutes. She locked the door, then checked it twice. Old habits. The duffel bag under her bed was still packed. Cash. Burner phone. Civilian clothes. Copies of Claire Donovan's documents. A second name she had never used but kept ready. She sat on the floor beside it for a long time. Outside, traffic hissed on wet pavement. Inside, the scan waited on the coffee table. Claire tried not to look. She failed. At midnight, she taped the scan to her kitchen window and shone a lamp behind it. The city lights blurred through the film. Her eyes moved. Arch involvement. Branch risk. Fragile tissue. Circulatory arrest likely. Possible staged graft. Maybe. Barely. A phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She let it ring. It stopped. Then a text appeared. This is Madison. I know I have no right to ask again, but my father wants to tell you himself what he did. Claire stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Another text followed. Room 714, private medical wing. Fort Liberty. 5 minutes, that is all. Claire threw the phone onto the couch, then picked it up again. She typed one word. No. Her thumb hovered over send. She deleted it. She put on her boots. At 2:31 a.m., Claire walked back through the private wing of Fort Liberty Medical Center. The hospital at night felt different after surgery. Quieter, but not peaceful. Machines breathed behind closed doors. Nurses moved like shadows. Somewhere, someone prayed badly under their breath. 2 military police officers stood outside room 714. They recognized her badge and let her pass. Inside, Senator Grant Whitaker lay beneath low blue monitor light. Claire had seen him many times on television, at podiums, in hearings behind flags. His voice had once been strong enough to turn a grieving country against her. Now he looked thin, skin waxy, mouth dry. Oxygen tubing rested beneath his nose. His hands lay on the blanket spotted with age. Madison stood near the window. Her eyes met Claire's. Thank you for coming. I'm not staying. The senator turned his head slowly. For a moment, he only looked at her. Then he said Dr. Monroe. Claire stayed by the door. That name sounded better before you dragged it through blood on national television. His eyes closed. Yes. The answer was too simple. She hated him for not defending himself. Madison moved toward the bed, but the senator lifted one weak hand. No, let her speak. Claire stepped into the room. You blamed me for your son's death. Yes. You knew the autopsy showed Marfan syndrome. He swallowed with difficulty. I knew. Madison looked away. Claire's voice dropped. When? The senator's eyes shone. 3 weeks after Dylan died. The room turned silent. Claire felt something inside her go completely still. 3 weeks? Whitaker's breath trembled. I was told the findings would complicate the investigation. No, they would have ended it. Yes. Claire moved closer. You knew my hands didn't kill him. Yes. You knew the surgery failed because his tissue was already falling apart. Yes. You knew I was innocent. The senator looked at her then, and there was no power left in his face. Yes. Claire's hand closed around the back of a chair. For years, part of her had wondered whether maybe the truth had been hidden by confusion, bureaucracy, fear, a system moving too fast after a public death. But no, he had known. 3 weeks, not 5 years. 3 weeks. You let me run. His voice broke. I did. You let people threaten me. I did. You let my command abandon me. Yes. Why? The word was barely human. Senator Whitaker stared at the ceiling. Because if Dylan died from a genetic condition, then he died from something in our family. In me. His mother had warned me about testing years before. I ignored it. Dylan ignored it. We all ignored it. Claire's eyes burned, but no tears came. So you chose me. I needed someone outside the family to carry it. Claire leaned over him. You made me your coffin. He flinched as if struck. Madison covered her mouth. The senator nodded once. Yes, Claire wanted to scream. She wanted to drag every monitor off the wall. She wanted to ask how a man could wear grief like a flag while feeding another person to the fire beneath it. Instead, she said, "Why tell me now?" The senator looked toward Madison. Because my daughter found the truth and did what I should have done. Madison shook her head slightly but said nothing. And because I am dying, Whitaker continued. Cowards get honest when the room gets small. Claire's laugh was quiet and bitter. At least you know what you are. He reached weakly toward the bedside table. Madison picked up a folder and placed it in Claire's hands. Claire did not open it. What is this? A signed confession, the senator said. Medical record suppression. Public defamation. Pressure placed on military investigators. Names, dates, communications. Everything I remember and everything Madison found. Claire looked down at the folder. It felt heavier than paper. There is also a legal agreement, Madison said. Full public exoneration. Cooperation with military review. Compensation. Restoration request. A public statement already drafted. Claire looked at her. You think money buys back a life? No, Madison said. I think truth has to start somewhere. Claire opened the folder. The first page carried Senator Whitaker's signature. Grant Ellison Whitaker. The same name that had once turned Rachel Monroe into a national warning. Her eyes moved over the words. I knowingly allowed false public accusations against Dr. Rachel Monroe to continue despite evidence that Captain Dylan Whitaker's death resulted from an undiagnosed genetic condition. Claire shut the folder. I should let you die. The room held its breath. The senator did not look away. Yes, Madison whispered Dad. He lifted his hand again. No, she should say it. Claire stepped closer to the bed. I should walk out of this room, pack a bag, and let your body do what your conscience never could. The senator's eyes filled. Yes, you do not deserve my hands. No, you do not deserve peace. No. Claire's voice cracked. Then why are you asking me? His answer came after a long, painful breath. Because my daughter still loves me. Madison turned toward the window, shoulders shaking. The room changed. Not enough to forgive him. Enough to make him human. Claire looked at the senator, this ruined old man, with power draining out of him tube by tube, and hated that she could still see the patient beneath the monster. That was the cruelest part of medicine. It did not let you choose only the worthy. A sharp voice sounded outside the door. Madison stiffened. Claire turned. Through the partially open door, she heard a man speaking in the hall. The timing is unacceptable. If he survives long enough to make that statement, we lose control of the entire narrative. Madison's face went pale. Victor. Claire moved silently to the wall beside the door. The senator looked confused. Madison stepped toward the hall, but Claire raised one hand. Stay. Victor Sloane's voice continued cold and impatient. You need to think bigger than your father's guilt. A death in surgery is tragic. A confession is catastrophic. Another voice answered too low to identify. Sloan said, if Monroe operates and he dies, the story writes itself. Disgraced surgeon kills second Whitaker. The public understands patterns. They do not understand medical nuance. Claire's blood cooled. Madison's eyes widened in horror. The other voice murmured something. Sloan laughed softly. If he survives, we pivot. Old scandal reopened. Monroe's fake identity. Unauthorized surgery, military cover-up. There are always ways to ruin a doctor. Footsteps approached. Claire moved fast. She slipped into the small bathroom and pulled the door nearly closed. Through the crack, she saw Victor Sloan pass the room. Tall, silver hair, perfect suit, phone pressed to his ear. The kind of man who never looked rushed because other people were paid to panic for him. He continued down the hall. Claire waited until the footsteps faded. When she stepped back into the room, Madison was shaking. I didn't know, Madison whispered. I swear to God I didn't know he was planning that. Claire looked at her. Are you recording him? Madison swallowed. Yes. Since when? 3 weeks. Why? Because when my father said he wanted to retire and confess, Victor got angry. Not concerned, angry. I knew something was wrong. Claire held out her hand. Show me. Madison unlocked her phone and opened a folder of audio files. Dates, times, notes, donor calls, strategy meetings, private conversations. Claire scrolled. You have a lot. Not enough. No, Claire said, not yet. Senator Whitaker looked between them, breathing shallowly. Victor did this. Claire turned to him. He is planning to use your death as a weapon. The senator closed his eyes. I made him powerful. Yes, Claire said. You did. Madison wiped her face. What do we do? Claire looked at the medical scan on the bedside table. Then at the confession folder in her hand. Then at the man in the bed. Her answer came slowly. We do not give him a clean room to lie in. Madison stared at her. Claire continued. If I operate, it happens under full documentation. Video from first incision to closure. Independent observers. Legal counsel. Chain of custody on every scan lab instrument record and medication. No private briefings. No closed notes. No missing files. Madison nodded quickly. I can get legal. Rourke's voice came from the doorway. I can get command medical oversight. Claire turned. He stood just inside the room, expression dark. He had heard enough. You followed me, she asked. You were walking into a private wing at 2:30 in the morning after Whitaker summoned you. Yes. For once, she did not argue. Rourke looked at the senator. Sir. Whitaker gave a weak nod. General. Rourke's voice was formal but cold. If this operation proceeds, Dr. Monroe controls the surgical plan. The name hung in the room. Claire did not correct him. Rourke continued. No political staff in the surgical wing. No unauthorized visitors. No outside communication with the operating room. Any interference gets reported to military police and federal investigators. Madison said I'll keep recording Victor. Claire looked at her. You will do more than record. You will get him to talk. Madison paled. He is dangerous. Yes. Claire stepped closer. So am I. The senator gave a faint, painful breath that might have been a laugh. Claire looked down at him. I am not doing this for you. I know. I'm doing it because I took an oath before your family taught me how expensive that oath could become. His eyes filled again. Thank you. Do not thank me. Claire turned to leave. At the door, Madison stopped her. Dr. Monroe. Claire looked back. Madison's voice was quiet. If he survives, the confession goes public. I promise. Claire studied her face. 5 years ago, she would never have trusted a promise from a Whitaker. Tonight, she trusted the fear in Madison's eyes more than the words. Make a copy, Claire said. I already made 6. For the first time, Claire saw something in Madison she almost respected. Rourke walked with her into the hall. Neither of them spoke until they reached the elevator. The doors opened, empty. Claire stepped inside. Rourke followed. As the elevator descended, the metal walls reflected them both. A hidden surgeon, a fading general, both trapped inside bodies and histories they did not fully command. Rourke said, "You know the mortality risk." Claire watched the floor numbers change. Yes. 70%, maybe higher. Yes. If he dies, even with precautions, Sloan will come for you. Claire looked at her reflection. He has been coming for me for 5 years. I just did not know his name. The elevator doors opened onto the surgical floor. Claire stepped out. Her voice was calm now. Too calm. Get me the full imaging set. Every lab, every consult note. I want blood products cross-matched before dawn. And find me a camera system that cannot mysteriously fail. Rourke walked beside her. And if command asks why, Claire did not slow down. Tell them Rachel Monroe is done hiding in the dark. The surgical floor changed before sunrise. Not loudly, not all at once. But Claire felt it in the air the way a field surgeon feels incoming fire before anyone hears the first impact. Extra guards appeared near the elevators. Legal officers moved through the hallway with sealed folders pressed to their chests. A hospital administrator stood outside operating room 3, pale and over-caffeinated, reading consent forms as if the words might explode. 2 independent surgeons from Duke had arrived in wrinkled civilian clothes, their eyes sharp, their silence sharper. Every camera had been checked twice. Every lab was printed, copied, sealed, and time-stamped. Every scan had been burned to disk, uploaded to secure command storage, and placed in evidence bags by a military police officer who looked deeply unhappy to be guarding medical imaging at 5 in the morning. Claire stood alone in the scrub room, staring through the glass at the operating table. Senator Grant Whitaker was not there yet, but his shadow already filled the room. General Rourke entered behind her. Command wants to know why this operation needs federal evidence protocol. Claire did not turn. What did you tell them? That the patient is a sitting United States senator with a high probability of intraoperative death and a politically sensitive medical history. Elegant. I left out the part where his strategist may be plotting a murder charge. That was kind of you. Rourke stepped beside her. He looked older than he had yesterday. The tremor had taken something from him. Or maybe admitting it had. His right hand rested inside the pocket of his scrub jacket, hidden but not forgotten. "You slept?" he asked. "Number? Eat." "No." "Of course." Claire looked at him then. "You. Number." "Of course." For one brief second, something almost human passed between them. Not friendship, not trust. Something made of exhaustion and necessity. Then the elevator doors opened down the hall. The senator arrived under military escort. His bed rolled slowly, surrounded by nurses' monitors, IV pumps, and 2 guards who kept their eyes on the corridor instead of the patient. Madison walked beside him, one hand on the bed rail. Her face was colorless but steady. She wore no makeup now, no polished armor, only a gray sweater under a dark coat and the look of a daughter trying not to become a witness to her father's death. Victor Sloan was not with them. That should have comforted Claire. It did not. Men like Sloan did not need to be present to be dangerous. Senator Whitaker turned his head as the bed approached. His eyes found Claire through the scrub room glass. For a moment, the years collapsed. She saw him behind a podium, voice shaking with manufactured certainty, calling her careless, arrogant, unfit to touch another patient. She saw reporters turning toward her like wolves hearing meat hit snow. She saw herself standing too still because movement would have looked like guilt. Now he lay beneath a blanket, thin and frightened, waiting for the hands he had ruined to open his chest. Claire looked away first. Madison stopped outside the scrub room. Dr. Monroe. Claire stepped into the hall. The name no longer struck as hard. That frightened her more than the pain had. Madison held out a small recorder sealed in a plastic evidence bag. I got him talking again. Rourke moved closer. Sloan. Madison nodded. He called me an hour ago. He wanted to know if the surgery was still proceeding. I told him yes. He said if my father died, I needed to be ready to make a statement blaming military incompetence and unauthorized surgical involvement. Claire's eyes narrowed. Did he mention me? Madison's mouth tightened. By name, Rourke asked, anything direct enough. Maybe. He said the public already knew Rachel Monroe had killed one Whitaker and would not struggle to believe she killed another. Claire absorbed it without blinking. Madison's voice dropped. He also said there were people inside the hospital who understood what was at stake. Rourke's face hardened. Names. No. Claire looked toward the OR. Then we assume every unexplained mistake is deliberate until proven otherwise. Rourke nodded. I already replaced the medication cart and locked access to the blood bank releases. Pharmacy is double verifying every drug in the room. Claire looked at Madison. Where is Sloan now? Campaign headquarters in Raleigh. Keep him there. I'm trying. No, Claire said. Do it. Madison's face stiffened, then she nodded. Behind them, Senator Whitaker's voice came weakly. Rachel. Claire turned. The hallway quieted. The senator looked small under the white blanket. Too small for all the damage he had done. I signed everything he said. I saw. No matter what happens in there, the confession goes public. Claire looked at Madison. Madison nodded. The copies are already with 3 attorneys, 1 federal investigator and a journalist my father trusts. Claire looked back at the senator. You should have done that 5 years ago. His eyes lowered. Yes. No excuse, no performance, just the word. Claire hated that the truth still mattered coming from his mouth. The administrator approached with a clipboard. Dr. Monroe. Before we proceed, I need verbal confirmation for the record that you understand your credentials are under emergency reinstatement authority for this procedure only pending review. Claire almost laughed. Emergency reinstatement. A clean phrase for a dirty situation. I understand, and you acknowledge this is a high mortality intervention with extraordinary risk. Yes, and you accept primary surgical responsibility. The hallway seemed to tighten around the question. Rourke looked at her. Madison looked at her. The senator looked at her. Claire looked through the glass at the operating room. 5 years of running had led her back to a door she swore she would never open. Yes, she said, I accept. The administrator wrote it down. The words became real. The senator was wheeled inside. Claire remained in the hallway for one more breath. Rourke stood beside her. You can still hate him while you save him, he said. Claire did not look at him. I know. That might matter. No, she said, the repair matters. She stepped into the scrub room and turned on the water. The scrub began the same as before. Palms, nails, wrists, forearms. But this time memory did not wait at the edge of the room. It entered with her. Dylan Whitaker had been 27. Laugh lines near his eyes. Marine captain. Chest pain after a training evolution. The initial workup had looked manageable. Then the vessel failed. Then the blood came. Then nothing she did was enough. She had spent 5 years telling herself she had not killed him. She believed it, most days. But belief did not erase the sound of a flatline. The water ran hot over her skin. Rourke scrubbed beside her in silence. His right hand shook once under the stream. Claire saw it. He saw her see it. I will not touch critical repair unless you ask, he said. Good. I can still assist. I know. I can still teach, observe, anticipate. Claire looked at him. You do not have to convince me you are useful. His face tightened. For a moment, she thought she had cut too deep. Then he nodded. Fair. Inside the OR, the room was brighter than before. Too bright. Every surface gleamed. Cameras sat in the corners, red lights blinking. A military legal officer stood near the wall with a tablet. The independent observers had taken positions where they could see, but not interfere. Everyone understood they were not only trying to save a life, they were trying to trap a lie before it swallowed another one. The anesthesiologist Colonel Mara Voss looked up as Claire entered. Patient is pre-oxygenated. Lines are secure. We have arterial access, central line bypass ready. Blood products are in the room. Pharmacy verified. Claire nodded. Read the drugs aloud before administration. Voss lifted one brow. Every time. Every time. Understood. Claire stepped to the table. Senator Whitaker's eyes were open. The anesthesia had not taken him yet. He looked at the cameras, then at Claire. "All this for me." Claire adjusted her gloves. "No, all this because of you." He accepted that with a faint nod. Madison stood in the observation gallery behind the glass. Her phone was in her hand. Recording, probably. Or waiting. Claire leaned over the senator. "Once you're under, you do not get to help me. So listen now." His eyes focused on hers. "If something goes wrong, I will make the decision that gives you the best chance of survival. Not the safest political outcome. Not the cleanest legal outcome. The medical one. I understand. No, Senator, I need you to say it." He swallowed. "You make the medical call, even if that call leaves you dead." Madison closed her eyes behind the glass. Whitaker looked at Claire for a long moment. Even then, Claire stepped back. "Proceed." Colonel Voss began the induction. The senator's eyes stayed on Claire as the drugs entered his bloodstream. Fear flickered in them at the end. Real fear. Human fear. Then his lids lowered. The monitors steadied. Voss checked the airway, secured the tube, listened. "He is under." Claire held out her hand. Scalpel. The blade touched her palm. A silence settled over the OR. Not the nervous silence of people waiting for disaster. The deeper silence of professionals entering a place where emotion had to wait outside. Claire made the incision. Skin opened. Blood welled. Cautery hissed. The first layers separated cleanly. The sternum came next. The saw screamed its brief metallic scream and split the bone beneath steady pressure. Retractors opened the chest. Senator Whitaker's heart beat beneath the lights. Fragile. Persistent. Claire stared at it for half a second too long. Rourke noticed. "Rachel." She blinked. "I'm here." And she was. The aorta came into view. The room felt it at the same time. One of the Duke surgeons whispered, "Dear God." Claire did not blame him. The vessel was worse than the scans. Much worse. The ascending aorta bulged with deep bruising. The arch looked thin and angry. The dissection line ran like lightning across tissue that should have been firm and resilient but instead looked tired, stretched, and ready to surrender. Claire adjusted the light. 3 grafts minimum, she said. Possibly 5. Prepare for hypothermic circulatory arrest. Voss looked up from anesthesia. Confirmed. Confirmed. That increases neurological risk. Not doing it increases death risk. Understood. Claire pointed with the forceps. Rourke exposure here. Ellis suction. Nobody touches the field unless I ask. If you see something, say it. If you think you see something, say it. Silence kills. The team responded as one. Yes, doctor. Doctor. The word moved through her chest and struck something buried there. She did not let it slow her hands. The first hour went better than expected. That made Claire suspicious. The cooling process was controlled. Bypass engaged cleanly. The first graft seeded with less bleeding than she had feared. Rourke anticipated every movement, handing her angles instead of instruments shaping the field without crowding it. His tremor stayed controlled when his hands rested against fixed points. He had adapted more than she expected. Good exposure, she said quietly. He did not look up. Good repair. Do not get sentimental. Never. The second graft was harder. The tissue near the arch resisted sutures badly. Not because it was tough, but because it was too weak. The needle wanted to cheese wire through the wall. Claire changed technique, smaller bites, wider spacing, lower tension. It cost time. The legal officer shifted near the wall. Claire heard the movement. Is there a problem? She asked without looking up. No, doctor. Then stand still. Rourke's eyes flickered with something like amusement. Claire ignored him. At hour 2, Voss called out core temperature target reached. Circulatory arrest on my mark. The room adjusted. This was the part civilians never understood. Sometimes, to save the body, you had to stop the river inside it. No heartbeat, no flow, no margin for delay, just cold time and hands. Claire looked at the clock. Mark. The heart stopped under controlled silence. The field changed. Cleaner, more terrifying. Claire moved into the arch repair with absolute focus. Every second mattered now. Brain protection was never a guarantee. The senator's body was cold still and dependent on the team not wasting a breath. Graft. The scrub nurse placed it. Suture. Needle loaded. Claire's hands moved. Precise. Fast. Unforgiving. The first arch branch was preserved. Then the second. Then the third. Time, Claire asked. 21 minutes arrest, Voss answered. Status. Stable under protocol. Good. Rourke leaned closer. Your distal edge is thin. I see it. Wider patch. No, it will buckle. Then angled reinforcement. Claire paused for less than a second. He was right. Patch. The scrub nurse moved. Claire placed the reinforcement, adjusted the graft angle, and tied down. It held. Good catch, she said. Rourke's eyes stayed on the field. I have watched you enough. Apparently. At 34 minutes, Claire restored flow. The room listened. A leak appeared along the lower suture line. Small. Manageable. Then another. Claire fixed both. Voss called pressure acceptable. No major drop. The observers remained silent. Madison stood behind the glass with both hands pressed together under her chin. The senator's heart restarted under stimulation, weak but present. The room allowed itself one quiet breath. Then the trap opened. It began with a number. Voss frowned at the monitor. Potassium is rising. Claire did not look up from the graft line. How high? 6.3. Repeat. Already sent. Claire's eyes moved to the anesthesia cart. What was administered? Voss's voice sharpened. Standard protocol. Calcium available. Insulin ready. Read all last 10 meds aloud. Voss did. Every medication sounded correct. Then the perfusionist said bypass reservoir pressure fluctuation. Claire froze. Say again. Minor fluctuation. Checking line. Rourke moved toward the bypass machine. Claire snapped, do not touch it. Perfusion only. The perfusionist examined the tubing. His face changed. What? He lifted a small connector. This cap seal was loosened. The room went cold. The legal officer stepped forward. Claire's voice cut through the air. Do not approach the sterile field. The perfusionist said it is still functioning. No contamination visible. But it was loosened. Rourke's face hardened into something dangerous. That machine was checked before incision. Yes, sir, the perfusionist said. By me. Claire looked at the cameras, then at the staff. Nobody moved. For 1 second, the operation became secondary to the knowledge that someone had reached into the room before them. Then the monitor alarm sounded. Voss said pressure falling. Claire turned back to the chest. Focus. We deal with sabotage after the patient lives. The words snapped everyone back. Where's the drop coming from? Rourke asked. Claire scanned the field. No obvious leak. Then she saw it. A shadow behind the third graft. Not where she had worked. Behind it. Deep. Hidden. Posterior rupture, she said. Rourke leaned in. Can you reach? Not cleanly. Voss said, pressure 50. Claire's mind moved fast. The rupture was positioned behind the repaired segment, possibly an old dissection pocket breaking under restored flow. If she pulled too hard, the entire graft line could tear free. If she ignored it, Whitaker would bleed out internally. If she reopened the field too widely, he might never come off the table. A resident whispered, do we call it? Claire's eyes snapped up. No one calls my patient dead while I still have a needle. The resident went pale. Claire held out her hand. Deep suction. Long clamp. Lateral patch. 40 proline. Rourke. I need exposure without tension. Rourke stepped in. His right hand trembled. He stopped himself. Claire saw it. So did the room. For 1 second, his face twisted with humiliation. Claire said, use your left as anchor. Right on the frame, not the tissue. Rourke repositioned. The tremor remained, but the retractor steadied. Like that, he asked. Exactly. The field opened just enough. Blood pulsed from the hidden tear. Voss called pressure 42. Claire placed the clamp blind guided by anatomical memory and the feel of disaster under her fingertips. The bleeding slowed. Not enough. Patch. The scrub nurse placed the material into her palm. One of the Duke surgeons stepped closer. That approach is not standard. Claire did not look at him. Neither is the injury. It may not hold. Then find me a better idea in the next 2 seconds. He said nothing. Claire began. The needle entered tissue so fragile it barely deserved the name. She used wide bites through healthier wall, catching the patch at a shallow angle, distributing force across the reinforcement, instead of asking the vessel to carry it alone. Thread, pierce, pull, set, not too tight. Never too tight. Blood soaked her gloves. Voss said 38. Push blood. Already running. Calcium. Given. Pressure. 40. Claire placed the next suture. Then another. The tear lengthened. A thin line opened under the patch. Rourke saw it. Left edge. I see it. Her shoulders screamed. Her lower back burned. The room narrowed until there was no senator, no scandal, no Sloan, no camera, no past. Only tissue. Only time. Only the promise every surgeon makes without words. Stay alive until I finish. Claire changed the angle. The needle curved through the vessel wall at a nearly impossible path. Rourke whispered, "That is the Kandahar stitch." Claire tied it down. The leak stopped on the left edge. The right side began to ooze. She placed 2 more. The bleeding slowed. Voss said, "Pressure 50, 55. No one breathed. Claire checked the patch with her fingers. Holding. Rourke did not speak. The Duke surgeon stared at the field as if he had witnessed a rule being broken and rewritten at the same time. Claire's voice was rough. "Do not celebrate. Rewarm, slow. Watch the graft pressure." The operation continued. Hour 4 turned into hour 5. The senator's body fought them at every stage. Coagulation faltered. Acidosis threatened. The graft line oozed in 3 places. Claire fixed each one before it became fatal. Rourke remained beside her, no longer trying to hide his disease, using supports, adjusting stance, letting residents take tasks his hand could not safely hold. It should have looked like loss. Instead, it looked like command. At hour 6, they began closure. The senator's heart beat on its own. Weak, but steady. Voss sounded almost disbelieving. He is maintaining pressure. Claire waited for the number to betray them. It did not. The final chest tube was placed. The sternum closed. The layers came together one by one, muscle, fascia, skin. The last stitch slid into place under Claire's aching fingers. Time, the circulating nurse said. 6 hours, 28 minutes. Claire stepped back. For the first time since incision, she looked through the observation glass. Madison was crying. Not gracefully, not politically. Her face was wet. Her hand pressed over her mouth. Her body bent forward as if the weight had finally found her. Claire looked away. "Transfer to ICU," she said. "Full monitoring. No visitors until cleared. Guard on the door. Nobody touches his lines without 2-person verification." Rourke nodded. "I will make it happen." Claire removed her gloves. Her hands were wrinkled, sore, and marked by pressure lines. They did not look miraculous. They looked used. She stepped into the scrub room and leaned over the sink. For several seconds she could not move. The water was off. The room was quiet. Her own breathing sounded too loud. The door opened. Rourke entered. "He is closed," he said. "Transport is moving." Claire nodded. "You saved him," Rourke said. She stared into the empty sink. "Did I?" "Yes." Claire looked up then. "Or did I just give Sloan another angle?" Rourke's expression hardened. "We documented everything. Someone tampered with the bypass seal, and we documented that too. He has people inside. Then we find them." Claire laughed softly, exhausted. "You make that sound simple." "No," Rourke said. "I make it sound necessary." Before Claire could answer, the scrub room door opened again. Colonel Voss stood there still in her cap face tense. "General, doctor, military police are outside." Claire closed her eyes. Rourke's voice changed. "For whom?" Voss looked at Claire. "For Dr. Monroe. The hallway outside the OR was filled with the wrong kind of silence. 2 military police officers stood beside a man in a dark suit Claire did not recognize. Federal, probably. His shoes were too polished for hospital work, his face too empty for medicine. Madison stood near the ICU doors arguing with another officer. When she saw Claire, she broke away. "No," Madison said. "No, this is Sloan. This is exactly what he wanted." The man in the suit held up a hand. "Dr. Rachel Monroe." Claire stepped forward. "Yes, I'm Special Agent Paul Granger with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. We need you to come with us to answer questions regarding the death of Captain Dylan Whitaker and irregularities surrounding your surgical credentials." Rourke moved between them. "She just completed a 6-hour emergency surgery." Granger looked at him. "General Rourke, this is not an arrest." "Then she is free to decline." "She is free to make this harder." Claire almost smiled. There it was. Not arrest. Not freedom. The old gray room between power and threat. Madison held up her phone. "I have recordings of Victor Sloan planning to frame her." Granger did not look impressed. "And we will review any evidence provided through proper channels." "He tampered with medical records," Madison said. "He tampered with this hospital." Granger's eyes shifted slightly. That one landed. Claire noticed. "Agent Granger," she said, "who initiated this inquiry." He looked at her. "New evidence was submitted anonymously last night. Let me guess. Emails claiming I knew Dylan Whitaker had Marfan syndrome before surgery." A flicker. Small, but real. Madison inhaled sharply. Rourke saw it, too. Claire nodded slowly. Sloan planted them. Granger's face remained controlled. "You can explain that during the interview." Rourke said, "She says nothing without JAG counsel and civilian counsel present." "Of course. And I am coming with her." "That is not necessary." Rourke stepped closer. "I have spent 30 years being necessary in rooms where men with badges thought they were the only authority that mattered. I am coming with her." Granger held his stare, then looked at the 2 military police officers. "Fine." Madison moved to Claire. "My lawyer is already on the way. I'm sending the recordings now." Claire looked at her. "Do not send copies. Send originals with metadata preserved. Chain of custody." Madison nodded quickly. "I know." Claire's eyes searched hers. "Keep your father guarded." "I will." "No political staff." "Already ordered." "No one from Sloan's office gets near him." Madison's voice hardened. "They won't." Claire turned to go. Then Madison caught her sleeve. "Rachel." Claire stopped. Madison's voice shook. "He survived because of you." Claire looked toward the ICU doors where Senator Whitaker had disappeared. For a moment she felt nothing, then everything. Anger. Relief. Grief. Exhaustion. The unbearable absurdity of saving a man she had every reason to hate only to be escorted away under suspicion before his blood had dried from under her nails. She gently pulled her sleeve free. "Make sure he wakes up long enough to tell the truth." The walk through the hospital felt longer than it should have. Staff watched from doorways. Nurses paused mid-chart. A resident who had been in the OR looked as if he wanted to speak but did not know how. Claire kept her head level. She had done this walk before. Different building, different uniform, same eyes. Outside, the morning was hard and bright after the rain. The pavement shone. A black government vehicle waited at the curb. Before Claire stepped in, she saw a man across the parking lane beside a dark sedan. Victor Sloan. Silver hair, perfect suit, phone in hand. He was not smiling broadly. Men like him never wasted expression. But the corner of his mouth lifted just enough for her to understand. The surgery had succeeded. So he had changed the battlefield. Claire climbed into the vehicle. Rourke sat beside her. As the doors closed, he looked forward and said quietly, "He is afraid." Claire watched Sloan through the tinted window. "No," she said, "not yet." The vehicle pulled away from Fort Liberty Medical Center. Behind her, a senator lay alive under guard. Ahead, the lie that had buried Rachel Monroe waited in another windowless room. Claire rested her hands in her lap. They were steady now. The government vehicle did not drive fast. That bothered Claire more than speed would have. Fast meant urgency. Sirens, panic, a situation still forming. This was controlled, quiet, procedural. The kind of ride that made guilt look official before anyone asked the first question. Fort Liberty passed behind the tinted windows in pieces. Barracks, flagpoles, wet pavement. Soldiers in formation turning their heads as the black vehicle rolled by. Claire kept her hands folded in her lap. The skin across her knuckles was raw from scrubbing. A faint line of dried blood remained beneath one nail. Senator Whitaker's blood. The man who had buried her. The man she had saved anyway. General Rourke sat beside her silent shoulders, squared, jaw locked. He had changed out of his surgical gown but still smelled faintly of antiseptic and fatigue. His right hand rested against his thigh. The tremor was there, small but steady. He did not hide it now. Claire noticed that. He noticed her noticing. Neither of them spoke. Special Agent Paul Granger sat in the front passenger seat reading from a tablet. His face reflected pale blue in the glass. He looked like a man trained not to care who was innocent until paperwork required it. Claire had known men like that. They did not hate you. They simply processed you. The vehicle stopped outside a low federal building on the edge of the base. No Guinea. Not a flag beyond a small one near the entrance. No reporters. Not yet. 2 military police officers escorted them inside. The hallway smelled like old carpet-burnt coffee and recycled air. Claire hated it immediately. They placed her in an interview room with gray walls, a metal table, 3 chairs, and a mirror that was obviously not a mirror. Rourke sat beside her before anyone could tell him not to. Granger entered with another agent, a woman in her 40s with cropped dark hair and a folder tucked beneath one arm. "Dr. Monroe," she said, "I'm Agent Laura Keene." Claire leaned back slightly. "Am I under arrest?" "No." "Am I free to leave?" Keene's expression did not change. "You are being asked to cooperate with an active federal investigation." Claire gave a tired smile. "That means no." Rourke said she answers nothing until counsel arrives. Keene looked at him. "General Rourke, your presence here is a courtesy." His voice stayed calm. "No, my presence here is a warning." Granger's eyes narrowed. Claire placed one hand lightly on Rourke's sleeve. Not to stop him. To remind him that the room had teeth. Keene opened the folder and slid a printed email across the table. Claire did not touch it. "Do you recognize this?" Keene asked. Claire glanced down. The email appeared to be from her old military medical account. 5 years old. Addressed to a surgical colleague. The text claimed she had reviewed Dylan Whitaker's genetic risk and decided not to delay surgery despite suspected Marfan syndrome. Claire read it once. Then again. Her stomach did not drop. It hardened. "This is fake." Keene watched her. "You are certain?" "I never wrote that." Granger placed another document beside it. This was submitted with server metadata. Claire looked at him. "Submitted by whom?" "Anonymous source. Victor Sloan." "We have not established that." "You have not wanted to establish that." Keene's eyes sharpened. "Dr. Monroe, we are not your enemy." Claire looked at the mirror. "No, you're the room the enemy hoped I'd end up in." Silence. Rourke leaned forward. "Senator Whitaker's political strategist has motive resources and documented intent to frame her. Madison Whitaker is providing recordings." Keene's gaze shifted. "We received audio files from Miss Whitaker's attorney 20 minutes ago." Claire sat a little straighter, and Keene did not answer immediately. That was the first good sign. Granger closed his tablet. "The files are being authenticated." Claire laughed softly. "You dragged me here before authenticating the evidence that exonerates me, but you were comfortable waving a fake email in my face because it accused me." Keene held her gaze. "That is why I'm in this room now instead of letting Agent Granger continue alone." Granger looked at her. Keene ignored him. Claire studied her for the first time. There was something different in the woman's face. Not softness, not sympathy, but friction. A mind not moving in the direction Sloan had planned. Keene opened another section of the folder. 3 months ago, our office received a sealed tip alleging irregularities in the original Dylan Whitaker medical file. Claire's breath slowed. Rourke turned slightly toward her. Keene continued. At first, it looked like old political noise. Then, 2 weeks ago, Madison Whitaker's private investigator provided a partial audit trail from Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. It suggested Dylan Whitaker's family history and genetic markers had been removed from his preoperative file before your surgical review. Claire stared at her. The words entered slowly, each one striking bone. Removed. Before your surgical review. She had known the file was incomplete. She had believed it after the autopsy. But belief was different from hearing a federal agent say it under fluorescent light. Rourke's voice was low. Who removed them? Keene slid another page forward. An administrative contractor named Peter Vallon, former medical records systems specialist. Deceased 2 years ago. Claire looked at the page. A photo of a thin man in a badge stared back at her. She did not recognize him. Keene said Vallon received $2 million through shell accounts connected to a consulting firm, later absorbed by Victor Sloan's lobbying network. Rourke's hand clenched. Claire did not move. Keene's voice lowered. Dr. Monroe. We believe Captain Dylan Whitaker's records were deliberately altered before surgery. Claire heard the sentence as if from underwater. For 5 years she had lived with a question no report could fully kill. What if I missed something? What if I was too confident? What if arrogance wore the face of certainty? Now the answer sat across from her in a federal folder. She had not missed the warning. Someone had stolen it. Rourke looked at her. Claire kept her face still because if she let it break here in this room in front of these people, she might not stop. Granger cleared his throat. The issue is that the newly submitted emails complicate the timeline. Claire turned toward him. No, they were planted because Senator Whitaker survived the surgery this morning. Keene looked at Granger. Then back to Claire. Tell me about this morning. Rourke said counsel. Claire lifted one hand. It's all right. He looked at her. She did not look back. Claire leaned forward. Victor Sloan knew the senator planned to confess. He knew the surgery could either save the senator or kill him. If the senator died on my table, Sloan could blame me and bury the confession. When the senator survived, Sloan needed another weapon. Keene asked, why would Sloan want Dylan Whitaker dead 5 years ago? Claire looked at the fake email. I don't know the whole answer, but Madison does. The door opened before anyone could respond. Madison Whitaker entered with a civilian attorney and a uniformed JAG officer behind her. She looked like she had run through every hallway in the building. Her hair had come loose. Her coat was open. Her phone was clutched in one hand. Keene stood. Miss Whitaker, this is an active interview. Madison placed her phone on the table. Then you need to hear the rest of it. Her attorney started to speak. Madison cut him off. No, they need to hear it now. Claire watched her. Madison looked back. For the first time, there was no family name standing between them. Only fear, fury, and the truth arriving late. Keene nodded once. Madison connected her phone to a small speaker her attorney removed from his briefcase. Her hand shook as she selected a file. Victor Sloan's voice filled the room. Calm, elegant, poisoned. Grant surviving is inconvenient, not fatal. We shift focus to Monroe. Unauthorized surgery. False identity. Prior negligence. The public already knows the shape of the story. Another voice asked, and the old emails. Already placed. Metadata backdated. Enough to force an inquiry. Once the press sees her escorted out, no one waits for proof. Claire's eyes did not leave the speaker. Sloan continued. If Grant tries to confess, he looks compromised. Postoperative confusion. Daughter manipulated by a disgraced surgeon. We muddy everything. We always have. The recording crackled. Then Madison's voice appeared colder than Claire had ever heard it. You altered Dylan's records. A pause. Sloan laughed. Your brother was already a liability. Madison's breath shook on the recording. What did you do? What your father was too weak to do. I made tragedy useful. No one in the room moved. Sloan's voice continued. Dylan dies, Grant becomes untouchable. He turns grief into legislation oversight defense partnerships. We ride the wave. Monroe was unfortunate but necessary. The public needed a face. Madison's recorded voice broke. You killed my brother. I created a movement. The file ended. The interview room remained silent. Claire stared at the table. Not at Madison, not at Keene, not at the mirror. Just the table. Because if she looked up, she would have to exist inside the sentence. Monroe was unfortunate but necessary. 5 years of hiding. Necessary. Her career burned. Necessary. The woman she had been erased. Necessary. Keene was the first to move. She looked at Granger. Get warrants for Sloane's office home devices and campaign servers, now. Granger did not argue this time. He left the room quickly. Keene turned to Madison. We need original files, source device cloud backups, and your investigator's chain of custody. Madison nodded. You'll have everything. Claire finally looked at her. Your father knew Sloane did this. Madison's face crumpled. No, not all of it. He knew you were innocent. He knew he lied. But I don't think he knew Victor caused Dylan's death. Claire's voice was quiet. You don't think? Madison swallowed. I don't know. The answer hurt because it was honest. Keene looked at Claire. Dr. Monroe, you are not a suspect in Captain Whitaker's death. The words should have landed like freedom. They did not. Freedom, Claire realized, did not arrive as a door flying open. Sometimes it arrived as a sentence in a gray room after the person who needed it had already learned to live without sunlight. Rourke exhaled beside her, slow and controlled. Keene added, You are a victim of evidence tampering, conspiracy, and likely obstruction of justice. Claire laughed once. It sounded almost like a cough. A victim? Nobody answered. She stood. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Rourke rose with her. Keene said, We still need your statement. You'll get it. When? Claire looked at Madison. After we arrest Victor Sloane. Keene studied her for a long second. Then she reached for her jacket. Fine. The campaign headquarters stood in downtown Raleigh inside a polished glass building that looked too clean to contain anything human. By the time Claire arrived with Keene, Rourke, Madison, and a team of federal agents, the lobby was already locked down. Staff members stood in small, frightened clusters. Phones buzzed, unanswered on desks. A television in the corner played silent news footage of Senator Whitaker's emergency surgery, the caption still vague enough to be dangerous. Victor Sloane was in his office on the 12th floor. He did not run. Claire respected that in a bitter way. Cowards often ran. Men like Sloane calculated whether running looked worse than outrage. They found him behind a wide desk phone and hand jacket, perfectly buttoned city skyline spread behind him. When the agents entered, his eyebrows rose. Is this really necessary? Keene stepped forward. Victor Sloane, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, tampering with medical records, evidence fabrication, and conspiracy related to the death of Captain Dylan Whitaker. Sloane's eyes flicked to Madison, then to Claire. There it was again. Not surprise. Annoyance. You, he said softly. Claire stepped into the office. The agents did not stop her. Sloane smiled faintly. You should have stayed dead, Doctor. Rourke moved behind Claire, but she did not need him to. She looked at Sloane and felt nothing like she expected. No cinematic rage. No explosion. Only a clean, hard disgust. You killed Dylan Whitaker, she said. Sloane tilted his head. Dylan Whitaker had a genetic defect. Nature killed him. You removed the warning from his file. I corrected a political problem. Madison made a small sound behind her. Sloane looked at Madison with irritation. Do not pretend moral injury now. Your family built its fortune on controlled narratives. Madison stepped forward. You used my brother. I used an event. You murdered him. Sloane's expression chilled. I made your father powerful enough for you to inherit something worth having. Madison slapped him. The sound cracked across the office. For a moment, nobody moved. Sloane slowly turned his face back. The agents grabbed his arms. Keene said, Cuff him. As they pulled his hands behind his back, Sloane looked at Claire. The public won't understand the medicine. They never do. Give them enough doubt, and they'll choose the simpler story. Claire held his gaze. Then I'll give them the truth until they choke on it. For the first time, something like anger broke through his polished face. The agents led him out past campaign posters showing Senator Whitaker smiling beneath slogans about honor service and accountability. Claire watched him go. She had imagined the man behind her ruin so many times without knowing his name. In her nightmares, he had been larger, darker, a monster with blood on his hands. In real life, he was a well-dressed strategist with a calendar full of donor lunches. That made it worse. On the drive back to Fort Liberty, Madison sat across from Claire in the federal van. Neither spoke for 10 minutes. Then Madison said, "I'm sorry." Claire looked out the window. "You've said that. I'll keep saying it. That won't make it useful." Madison's voice was small. "I know." The road hummed beneath them. Claire asked, "Is your father awake?" Madison checked her phone. "Yes, ICU says he's asking for you." Claire almost said no. The word rose naturally, cleanly, but it did not leave her mouth. Fort Liberty Medical Center looked different in daylight. Not safer, just exposed. News vans had gathered outside the main gate. Reporters stood under bright lights speaking urgently into cameras. Military police kept them back, but their lenses turned toward every vehicle that entered. Claire felt her body remember. The crowd, the shouting, the hunger. Rourke noticed. "You do not have to face them today." Claire kept her eyes forward. "I already did 5 years ago. That is not the same as being ready." "No," she said, "it is not." Inside the ICU, Senator Whitaker lay surrounded by machines, pale but alive. Tubes ran from his body. His breathing was supported, but his eyes were open. Madison stood beside the bed. Rourke remained near the door. Claire approached slowly. The senator turned his head. "Rachel." She stopped at the foot of the bed. "You're alive." His mouth moved into something too weak to be a smile. "You sound disappointed." "I haven't decided." A faint breath escaped him. Pain or laughter she could not tell. Madison touched his arm. Victor was arrested. The senator closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "He killed my son." Madison did not answer. She did not have to. The senator looked at Claire. "I blamed you." "Yes, I knew you were innocent." "Yes, but I did not know he had done that." Claire's voice stayed cold. "That does not make you clean." "No. You still chose the lie after the autopsy." "Yes? You still let me burn." "Yes." His honesty was unbearable. Claire gripped the metal rail at the foot of the bed. 2 years, she said. His brow furrowed. "What? You told me you knew within 3 weeks that I was innocent." "Madison told me later you suspected Sloane's manipulation for years." The senator's eyes shifted toward his daughter. Madison looked down. Claire leaned closer. "How long did you know there was more?" His silence answered first. Then he whispered 2 years. Claire's hands tightened. 2 years. I was afraid. She almost smiled. There it was. The root of so much evil. Not hatred. Fear wearing a powerful man's suit. You were afraid of losing your seat. Yes. Your legacy. Yes. Your name. Yes. Claire's voice shook. So you let me lose mine. The senator wept then. Quietly. Pathetically. Without dignity. A younger version of Claire would have wanted that. She would have wanted to see him broken, reduced, forced to feel even a fraction of what he had caused. But standing there now, she discovered that his tears did not restore anything. They only made the room heavier. "I'm resigning," he said. Madison wiped her face. "The statement is scheduled for tomorrow," she added. "The confession, the autopsy, the records, Sloane's arrest. Everything." Claire looked at the senator. "You will say my name." "Yes." "You will say I did not kill Dylan." "Yes." "You will say you knew." His lips trembled. "Yes." "You will say you used your power to destroy an innocent woman because grief was easier than truth." Madison closed her eyes. The senator looked at Claire. "Yes." She nodded once. "Good." She turned to leave. "Rachel," he said, She stopped. His voice was barely audible. "Thank you for saving my life." Claire did not turn around. "I did my job." She walked out before he could answer. The press conference happened the next afternoon in a secured auditorium at Fort Liberty Medical Center. The room was packed wall to wall. Reporters, cameras, military representatives, legal teams, hospital officials, former colleagues who had flown in quietly after hearing the story break. Some came to support her. Some came because guilt had finally found their address. Claire stood in the back beside Rourke. She wore a plain dark suit Madison's attorney had arranged because Claire owned nothing fit for public resurrection. Her hair was tied low. Her hands were empty. That felt important. No gloves, no scalpel, no chart, just her. Rourke stood close enough that his shoulder nearly touched hers. "You can leave," he said quietly. "No. You can also sit." "No." "Understood." On the stage, Senator Grant Whitaker appeared in a wheelchair. The room erupted instantly. Questions flew. "Senator, did you resign? What did Victor Sloan do? Is Dr. Rachel Monroe here? Did you suppress evidence?" The senator lifted one shaking hand. The room slowly quieted. Madison stood behind him, eyes red but steady. The senator leaned toward the microphone. 5 years ago, my son, Captain Dylan Whitaker, died during emergency surgery. In the days and weeks that followed, I told the American people that his surgeon, Dr. Rachel Monroe, was responsible. Cameras clicked. Claire's breath remained even. I lied. The room exploded again. The senator raised his voice weaker but firm. I lied because I was grieving, because I was ashamed, and because blaming Dr. Monroe was easier than facing the truth. My son had an undiagnosed genetic condition, Marfan syndrome, which caused catastrophic vascular failure. Dr. Monroe did everything medically possible to save him. Claire stared at the floor. The words moved through the room, through cameras, through wires, through the country that had once consumed the lie. The senator continued. I knew within weeks of Dylan's death that Dr. Monroe was not responsible. I suppressed that truth. I pressured military channels. I allowed false accusations to destroy her career, her reputation, and her life. A reporter shouted. The senator closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked toward the back of the room, at Claire. Because I was a coward, no one spoke. Because I chose my public grief over private truth. Because I allowed Victor Sloan to turn my son's death into political fuel. And because I did not have the moral courage to stop it. Madison lowered her head. The senator's voice broke. Dr. Monroe saved my life yesterday after everything I did to her. She had every reason to refuse. She had every reason to let my lie die with me. But she honored her oath when I had failed mine. Claire felt her eyes burn. She did not wipe them. Today, I am resigning from the United States Senate. I am cooperating fully with federal investigators. I am publicly and completely exonerating Dr. Rachel Monroe. And I am asking the Military Medical Board to restore her credentials immediately. A storm of camera flashes. The senator lifted a folder. This contains my signed confession supporting evidence and a settlement agreement compensating Dr. Monroe for the years I stole. No amount of money can repay what I took. But the truth can no longer wait for my comfort. Questions erupted again. Then one reporter near the front turned. Dr. Monroe. Dr. Monroe, do you accept his apology? Every camera swung toward the back. Claire stood very still. Rourke said under his breath, You do not owe them a performance. Claire believed him. Then she walked forward anyway. The crowd parted in a strange, rippling silence. She reached the microphone beside the senator. Up close, he looked worse, gray, drained, human in the smallest way. Claire faced the cameras. For a moment, she saw the old hearing room overlaid on this one. The microphones, the lights, the faces waiting to decide what kind of woman she was. Back then, she had tried to defend herself like the truth was enough. Now, she knew truth needed witnesses. My name is Dr. Rachel Monroe, she said. Her voice was steady. I did not kill Captain Dylan Whitaker. No one interrupted. I spent 5 years living under another name because powerful people found it easier to bury me than admit they were wrong. I lost my work, my home, my uniform, my colleagues, and parts of myself I may never fully get back. The room was silent now. She looked at the senator. Senator Whitaker's apology matters. His confession matters. The investigation matters. But none of it erases what happened. She turned back to the cameras. I am angry. I am tired. I am relieved. All of those things can be true at once. A reporter asked, softer this time, "Do you forgive him?" Claire looked at Madison, then at the senator, then at Rourke standing in the back with his trembling hand resting openly at his side. "No," she said. The room held its breath. "Not today." The senator lowered his eyes. Claire continued, "But I am done letting his lie decide where I go, what name I use, or whether I touch a scalpel again." The words surprised her as she said them, not because they were untrue, because they were. She stepped away from the microphone. This time no one chased her. 3 months later, winter settled over North Carolina in cold silver mornings and early dark. Fort Liberty Medical Center kept moving as hospitals do. New casualties arrived. Old patients healed or did not. Machines broke. Coffee burned. Residents made mistakes. Nurses caught them. Families waited in chairs that were never comfortable enough for bad news. Rachel Monroe no longer wore Claire Donovan's badge. The old name had come back slowly at first, printed on temporary credentials, spoken awkwardly by staff who had known her as someone else, written on legal documents, medical board notices, and letters from hospitals that had once ignored her calls. Johns Hopkins offered a trauma chair. Mayo offered a surgical director position. Mass General sent a formal apology and an invitation that sat unopened on her kitchen table for 9 days before she threw it away. She stayed at Fort Liberty, not because it was easy, because it was honest. Her first lecture was held in a windowless classroom beneath the surgical wing. 20 residents sat in rows, too alert, too nervous, pretending not to stare at the woman from every headline. General Rourke sat in the back. He had stepped down from active surgical command 2 weeks after the press conference. The official reason was medical transition. The unofficial truth was known by enough people to become a kind of respect. He now taught surgical decision-making, battlefield triage, and how to surrender a knife before pride turned lethal. Rachel stood at the front of the room with a scan projected behind her. Master Sergeant Luke Hayes' scan. He had survived the ICU, then pneumonia, then a second bleed, then the long, ugly work of recovery. He was still alive. That mattered more than clean endings. Rachel looked at the residents. The first mistake young surgeons make is believing the operation begins with incision. No one wrote yet. Good. She pointed to the scan. It begins here. Before the first cut. Before the first clamp. Before your ego gets dressed up as confidence. A young lieutenant in the front row raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do you know when a risk is justified?" Rachel looked at the scan for a long moment. The room waited. "You don't always know." The residents shifted. Not the answer they wanted. Rachel continued. "You gather the facts. You listen to the team. You respect the anatomy. You tell the truth about the odds. Then you ask one question. Is this risk for the patient, or is it for me?" Pens moved now. In the back row, Rourke smiled faintly. His right hand trembled around a paper cup. He did not hide it. After the lecture, the young lieutenant approached Rachel near the podium. "Dr. Monroe." "Yes." The lieutenant hesitated. "I almost quit last month." Rachel studied her. "Why?" "I lost a patient. First one where I was primary assistant. I keep seeing it." Rachel's expression softened, but not too much. Pity could humiliate a young doctor faster than cruelty. "What was his name?" The lieutenant blinked. "Private Aaron Mills." "Say it again." "Private Aaron Mills." "Do not turn him into a lesson too quickly," Rachel said. "Let him be a person first. Then learn." The lieutenant's eyes shone. "How did you keep going?" Rachel looked down at her hands. For once, the answer did not feel like a wound. I didn't, not for a while. The lieutenant nodded slowly. Rachel added, "Then someone needed me before I felt ready." Across the classroom, Rourke stood and gave her a small nod. Outside the lecture hall, Madison Whitaker waited near the corridor windows. She wore a navy coat and held 2 paper coffees. Rachel stopped. "You are developing a habit of appearing in restricted medical areas." Madison held up a visitor badge. "Fully authorized this time." Rachel accepted 1 coffee. "What do you want?" Madison looked through the window at the courtyard, where a thin layer of frost covered the grass. "My father's sentencing agreement was accepted this morning." Rachel said nothing. Madison continued, "He will serve under medical confinement while cooperating with the investigation. Full resignation remains, no return to office." And Sloan, trial in spring. Federal prosecutors added negligent homicide conspiracy tied to Dylan's death. Rachel took that in. The word homicide should have felt like balance. It did not, but it had weight. Madison looked at her. "I'm running for the open seat." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "That is a brave thing to say to me." "I know. Politics did a lot of damage." "Yes. And you think politics will repair it?" "No," Madison said. "But policy might prevent some of it from happening again." Rachel waited. Madison handed her a folder. Rachel looked down. The Dylan Whitaker Combat Medicine Scholarship Fund. Full tuition. Surgical training grants. Mental health support for military clinicians involved in traumatic patient deaths. Legal defense support for doctors facing politically motivated malpractice attacks. Rachel opened the folder. Dylan's photograph was inside. Not the one from the news. Not uniformed. Not polished. A young man in a t-shirt smiling beside a field hospital tent, holding a stack of medical journals. Rachel stared at it longer than she meant to. Madison said, "He would have liked you." Rachel closed the folder gently. "No," she said, "he would have argued with me." Madison smiled through sudden tears. "Probably." For a moment, they stood together without forgiveness and without hatred. Something quieter had begun taking shape between those 2 impossible poles. Madison asked, "Will you serve on the selection committee?" Rachel looked down the hall. A nurse pushed an empty stretcher past them. Somewhere, a monitor alarm chimed. A resident jogged by with a chart in one hand and panic in both eyes. Life continuing, messy and indifferent. "Yes," Rachel said. Madison exhaled. "Thank you. Do not make me regret it." "I won't." Rachel almost smiled. Almost. That afternoon, she visited Luke Hayes in the rehabilitation wing. He was standing between parallel bars sweating through a gray Army t-shirt, while a physical therapist barked encouragement like a drill sergeant with better shoes. His wife stood nearby with both daughters. The younger one held the same stuffed rabbit, now wearing a tiny camouflage bandage around its middle. Luke saw Rachel and grinned. "Doctor." Rachel folded her arms. "You are supposed to be walking, not flirting with death." "I'm multitasking." His wife rolled her eyes. "He's impossible." "Most operators are," Rachel said. The older daughter stepped forward and saluted Rachel. It was solemn, perfectly serious. Rachel returned it. The younger held up the rabbit. "He got surgery, too." "I can see that." "He was brave." Rachel crouched. "So was your dad." The little girl considered this. "Were you scared?" The room quieted. Adults always ruined honest questions by trying to rescue children from them. Rachel did not. "Yes," she said. The girl frowned. "But you still did it." Rachel looked at Luke alive and shaking on weak legs, then at his wife, then at the children who still had a father because one night had gone differently from another. "Yes," Rachel said, "I still did it." The girl nodded satisfied. As Rachel left the rehab wing, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. For a moment, her body tightened. Old fear. Then she opened it. It was from Senator Whitaker. "I watched your press statement again today. I do not ask for forgiveness. I only want you to know I said Dylan's name out loud this morning and told the truth. I will do that every day I have left." Rachel stared at the message. She did not reply, but she did not delete it either. That evening she walked alone to the hospital roof. The air was cold. The sky over Fort Liberty burned orange behind the flight line. Helicopters sat in dark silhouettes against the last light. Somewhere far off, artillery training thudded like distant thunder. The door opened behind her. Rourke stepped out with 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. "You keep finding dramatic rooftops," he said. "You keep bringing terrible coffee. It is my remaining medical specialty." She took the cup. They stood side by side. For a while, neither spoke. Then Rourke said, "Board restored your license today." Rachel looked at him. Fully. She faced the skyline again. The news moved through her more quietly than expected. 5 years ago, she would have fallen to her knees for that sentence. Now it simply opened a door. Rourke said you could operate anywhere. "I know. What will you do?" Rachel watched a helicopter lift from the far pad, rising into the bruised evening sky. "I'll operate when I should. Teach when I can. Stop when my hands or my head make me dangerous." Rourke looked at his own hand. A difficult standard. Yes, the right one. She nodded. Below them, the hospital lights glowed one by one. Rourke said, "You know, Claire Donovan was a good nurse." Rachel's mouth tightened. "She kept me alive. She did more than that." Rachel looked at him. She wasn't real. Rourke shook his head. She was real enough to save a colonel in 3 seconds. Rachel thought of the trauma bay. The blood, the torn artery. The moment her hands betrayed her hiding and told the truth before her mouth could. Maybe survival names were still names. Maybe the life she built in hiding had not been only a lie. Maybe people could be more than the worst thing done to them, and more than the mask they used to endure it. She looked down at her hands. Steady, scarred, known. The roof door opened again. A young corpsman poked his head out breathless. "Dr. Monroe, General Rourke." "Sorry. Trauma inbound. Training convoy rollover. Multiple casualties. ETA 4 minutes. Rachel set the coffee on the ledge. Rourke did the same. For 1 second, they looked at each other. No speeches. No ghosts. No hiding. Then Rachel walked toward the door. By the time she reached the stairwell, her voice had already changed. "Call vascular. Open trauma, bays 1 and 2. Blood bank, massive transfusion protocol. Tell the residents to move like they mean it." The corpsman ran ahead. Rourke followed beside her, not as the surgeon he had been, but as the teacher he had chosen to become. At the bottom of the stairs, the trauma bay doors burst open. Wheels screamed against the floor. Voices rose. Blood hit white tile. A young soldier reached for Rachel with shaking fingers. She took his hand. "My name is Dr. Monroe," she said. "You're at Fort Liberty Medical Center. We've got you." The soldier tried to speak. Rachel leaned closer. "Save your breath. We're going to use it." Across the room, a resident froze at the sight of the wound. Rachel looked at him, not harshly, clearly. "Breathe through your hands," she said. He swallowed and moved. The room organized around her voice. Clamp. Pressure. Line. Scalpel. The work began again, not as punishment, not as redemption, as work. Outside, night settled over the base. Inside, beneath the white lights, Rachel Monroe stepped fully into the life that had waited for her on the other side of fear.